Let's put our hands together to receive our speaker today, Bishop Oginde. Karibu sana.
I've been asked to talk about the making of a leader. What makes a leader? And being in a church, being a church event, allow me to use a story that is recorded for us in the Bible between Jesus and two of his disciples on the matters of leadership. What is it that makes a leader? Or how does one become a leader? When President Nelson Mandela passed on some years back, the whole world stopped and turned their attention both to mourn and to celebrate Nelson Mandela. I don't know of any other leader in the world whose death has drawn the whole world together like Nelson Mandela and his death did. And considering that he was an African, many Africans die quietly and are buried quietly, even leaders. But this one time when world leaders from across the globe gathered in South Africa, from top nations of the world, to celebrate the life of this one man. Friends and enemies alike put aside their differences and sat side by side in Johannesburg in a chilly weather to celebrate this man. And the question that has occupied my mind and others is, how did Mandela get to the place where the whole world could celebrate his life? What is it that caused this one man to draw the attention of the world and continues even at this time? You rarely talk about great leadership without referring to Mandela, whether in Africa or elsewhere. I remember when he was released from prison, we were in the United States of America at the time, and it was one of his first places to visit. And the Americans, I think, at that time, underestimated who Mandela was. And so the government gave him what we call a wide berth. You know? They did not care about him. But when he arrived, he overshadowed everything. All TV stations, great and small, were focused on Mandela. And at last minute, the government had to reorganize itself to give him a state welcome. Because they realized that there was a man in the country that they had underestimated. So I ask, or people have asked, what is the underlying issue that makes a leader to get to that point where they are so celebrated? Are leaders born? Are they made, or are they appointed or elected? Was Mandela born to be a leader and to become such a great man? How can any of us get to that place where we also have impact? Maybe not to his level, but in our own sphere, get to the place where we can make a difference and be celebrated leaders. How are leaders made? And as I said, I want to use a story that is recorded for us. It's an incident on leadership. In the book of Mark, chapter 10, verse 35 to 40, the Bible says that out of the disciples, Jesus had 12 disciples. And this was a time when Jesus tells his disciples that he's about to leave them. And he was going to Jerusalem. And we are told in verse 35, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him and said, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. And Jesus asked them, what do you want me to do for you? And they replied, let one of us sit at your right and another at your left when you come to your glory. Jesus replied, these people, you don't know what you're asking. Jesus said, can you drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup and be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with. But to sit on my right or on my left is not for me to grant. For these places belong to those for whom it has been prepared. I want to pick out 3 things very quickly because our time is brief. Because I see Jesus pointing out some critical things in the making of a leader in his answer to James and John, who wanted to sit on the left and on the right. And we have been in that season where we have seen, especially at national level, the major parties, the main parties, so groupings of Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, the choosing of deputy president has been a big thing. Who will sit on the left or on the right? And in this case, on the right. And you know what has been going on because you are Kenyans. The struggles, both for those who want the position and those who are supposed to grant the position. That's cost us star. I want to say that the making of a leader begins with what I call the craving of the soul. A desire from deep within. I want to say that the making of a leader starts with the crucible of suffering. The making of a leader starts with in the corridors of service. When James and John went to Jesus to ask for these positions of leadership, to be his deputies, I don't know who would have been sitting to the left or to the right, but they didn't care us at that point. All they wanted is to sit on his left and right. Because they thought that Jesus was going to Jerusalem to establish a kingdom in Israel. And they wanted to be his deputies. And as preachers, we have talked and vilified these guys for their kimbelembele, going behind. Because if you read further that story, when the other 10 disciples discovered what these people had done, the Bible says they were so angry, as would happen in any political environment, where you are thinking we are all equal. Then you hear your friends have gone behind your back and have sought key positions in the leadership. So many times we have vilified these people. But what I find here is very interesting, that the making of a leader starts by this kind of a spirit. They did the right thing in the wrong way. So the right thing doesn't become wrong. No one can become a leader unless they step forward, unless they are willing to seek that position of leadership. And this morning, we are talking to a number of us who are called political aspirants. You are better than 40-something million of us. Because there are many of us who desire to see good things happen, but we don't have the courage to step forward. Leadership begins with a stepping forward. that you see the trouble that people are in, that you see the needs that are around, and you feel or something tells you, I need to do something about this. And you step out and present yourself and say, I can do something. Because unless that happens, it is difficult for leadership to happen. Moses in the Bible, when he was in a very privileged position in Pharaoh's palace, he saw his people suffering in slavery. And something within him told him, I have to do something. And though he was in a very privileged position in the palace where he would not have cared, he felt, I have to go out there. And he tried. He tried twice. Those of you who have tried before, try again. The time will come when it will happen. And mine is to encourage you to keep trying, even if it doesn't work. In fact, he killed a person in the process. That's how passionate he was. Don't kill anybody. Because it cost him 40 years in the wilderness. So if you kill someone, by the time you come out, it will be 40 years later. If it had not been for God, Moses would not have got into leadership. But this thing was so deep in his heart, he felt that I need to do something about the suffering of my people. David, a young boy, went to the field, and there was a confrontation between Israel and Philistines. And on the side of the Philistines, there was this giant Goliath, who was taunting the army of Israel and say, give us a man, give us a man. And sometimes I hear you people say that in the platforms, isn't it? Bring it on. And so when David was sent to go to the field to take food to his brothers, and he saw what was happening there, even though he was only a young boy, something within him said, this cannot happen. The armies of Israel cannot be defied and be embarrassed and ashamed like this. I want to do something about it. He went to his brothers and said, what will be given to a man who takes this guy? And the brothers looked at him and said, my friend, you are only a boy. And some of you will be told that, my friend, keep quiet. You don't know politics. But something burned in his heart. He felt, no, I have to do something. So finally, he ended up in the palace with King Saul. And Saul asked him, what do you want to do? He said, I'm going to take this guy. Many of us may know the story of David. He brought down Goliath because of that burning desire to do something in this case. At the peak of apartheid in South Africa, the heart of young Nelson Mandela burned within him to do something to change the situation. He risked his life and stepped out to provide leadership to the black community against the oppressive forces of the white man. This is what set this man into the place where he eventually became a great man. That burning desire within him to make a difference, to change the way things happen. And so I say that leadership opportunities are everywhere. But it is those who see with the eyes of leadership who will take those opportunities. It is those people whose hearts burn within them at the suffering of various ones that will step forward. I don't know your motivation this morning for getting into or seeking a political office. But I want to hope that there are few of us who are driven by a genuine desire to bring a difference in our county, to bring a difference in our country, to bring a difference in your ward, to make a difference wherever you are, because you have looked and something within you tells you, I need to do something. Obviously, there are those people who it is just going to be prestigious to be called Mheshimiwa. For some of us, it will be prestigious to be called Your Excellency. For some of us, it is because of the perks that will come. For some of us, because of it's an opportunity to eat, and now it is our turn to eat. But I pray that there are people here who are saying, our country cannot continue like this. Our county cannot continue like this. Our ward cannot continue like this. And so it is that burning desire in you that is telling you, I need to step out, even though I may not have all it takes, but I'll try. Leadership starts with a desire, a craving of the soul. But secondly, leadership is born in the crucible of suffering. What do I mean? When James and John went to Jesus and said, we want to sit on the left and we want to sit on the right, Jesus said, hey, my friend, you don't know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? When they said yes, Jesus told them, you will drink the cup and you will be baptized with the baptism. But to sit on the left or to sit on the right is not for me to grant. What Jesus was saying here, for those of us who may not be familiar with this story, he was not talking about drinking a cup of tea like we have taken this morning. The cup that he was talking about was a cup called the cup of suffering. He was going to the cross to be crucified. And we see him on the day he was arrested, crying in the Garden of Gethsemane. And even though he had come knowing that he was going to suffer. But when the moment came, he cried and he prayed. And the Bible tells us that he prayed with sweat of blood. What was his prayer? He said, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. That is the cup that he was talking about. The cup of pain and suffering. So he was telling James and John that leadership is not as easy as you think. It is not as prestigious as you imagine. Leadership comes with pain and suffering. And those who make it through challenges and difficulties. The prevalent spirit in our time is to get to the top in the quickest time possible and at no cost to us. I have seen young men and women who want to be in the top leadership position without passing through the road of growth in leadership. But I would ask, do we have to suffer in order for us to be leaders? I don't think so. But history seems to point out that many of the people who become great leaders have walked the path of challenges, of difficulties, and of suffering. There is no easy road to freedom, said Nelson Mandela. We must pass through this. Moses, that we talked about, spent 40 years in the wilderness before he was to lead people of Israel out of Egypt. David, after he was anointed to be king, spent some 16 years running from King Saul in the wilderness. Indeed, many of the people that have come to places of great leadership have gone through challenges and difficulties. One W. Tozer said, if God has singled you out to be a special object of his grace, you may expect him to honor you with stricter discipline, greater suffering than less favored ones are called to endure. The implication is that if God has picked on you or I to be his chosen vessels to bring about change and transformation, be sure that he will use the hammer, the chisel, cruel tools in order to shape you so that you don't remain formless and unbeautiful. There is no easy road to leadership. And we are not saying that you must suffer. We are only saying that you will suffer. There's a big difference. You don't have to, but you will. I know of no great man or woman who has got to the highest levels of leadership without passing through the crucibles of God's molding. It is only those who have drunk the dregs of the cup of suffering who become true servant leaders. The few that sneak in quietly without passing through this road become tyrants, dictators, become selfish. They see leadership only as something to be gained from. But men and women who have the interest of the people at heart are men and women who know what it means to sacrifice. You have to be a person who has gone through challenges, difficulties. Appreciation of life is not easy in order for you to see the suffering of other people, and therefore to provide a leadership that will help those people. Going back to Nelson Mandela, 27 years in the oppressor's prison, yet ruled only for 5 years. If it was ordinary us, we would have said, even you can see, 27 years I suffered. You want me to rule for only 5 years? He would have died in office. But because he had gone through that process, he knew what leadership was all about. When his people were insisting that we must send out all the white men from South Africa, they cannot be part of our government after they have oppressed us for this long. Nelson Mandela said, no. This is not how leadership is done. And he stood his ground, integrated the white man into the new government. And that's how in 5 short years, he brought about change in his country. Where are the men and women in our nation, in our counties, in our wards, who will go out there with the idea that I want to bring about change, do government differently, do politics differently? All the young people, all the older people who have not passed through this crucible of suffering, all they know is, I want to get as much as I can while I can. And no wonder every election time we change leaders. We change leaders. Because the moment an MP goes in, the only thing they can think of is myself. The governor comes in and eats as much as they can. How comes that so much money is sent to our counties, but so little is done with it? Can the people sitting in this room this morning choose to do politics differently? Choose to do leadership differently? You will have to go against the grain. But against the grain is what it takes to be a true leader. Finally, in Africa, and indeed for many people, leadership is often associated with the twin benefits of power and possession. No wonder one of the great misconceptions that James and John had was that leadership comes by being appointed by those in places of authority. In their view, therefore, the making of a leader involves walking the corridors of power. The connections that you have, rubbing shoulders with those who can grant you appropriate positions, whether you are qualified or not. And that seems to be our concept here in this country. It is the know who, not the know how. And once you are well connected, you can get anywhere. But Jesus quickly disabused them of this position, this notion. He was saying that Jostling and strategic positioning is not what makes a leader. He called his disciples together and he said, you know, those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be the first must be the slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. Jesus is saying that the making of a leader is not walking the corridors of power. It is walking the corridors of service. Come down and serve the people. You become powerful immediately. The people will lift you up. You don't need big guys to speak on your behalf. Go down to the ground and serve the people, and they will bring you up. So Jesus therefore said, instead of pacing up and down the corridors of power, looking for leadership positions, go to the corridors of service where true leaders are made. Whoever wants to become great must be a servant of all. This country is endowed with riches that many countries don't have. This country is in a privileged position more than any other country in our region. This country has known stability more than any other country in this region. It means that if we get true leaders who will commit themselves to serve the people, we can be the superpower of Africa. We can be there. If we set aside our selfishness and we just say, as an MCA, I want to make sure by the 5 years that I am done with this ward, people will be coming to benchmark in my ward. And imagine if the over 2,000 wards in this country were to do that. My friend, this country will be very, very far. And what if the governor does that for their county? And say, I'm going to be the governor to be benchmarked on. And what about the president? If the president says, we are going to be the ones. What about the judges and all the people who are here? I can tell you, this country is going to go far. And so, I call to all of us this morning, and I'm not just talking to political leaders, I'm talking to all of us, even in church, in every place where we are. Let's commit ourselves to doing a good job, wherever we may find ourselves. And let this nation of Kenya bring pride to our hearts because of what we'll have done. Thank you, and God bless you. Amen.
Let's clap. Give him a better clap.